Hello, people of the internet. I hope you are all doing well, and thank you so much for coming to hang out with me today. For those of you who are new here, welcome to Start the Beat, a podcast documenting the past, present, and future of the Pittsburgh music scene. I am your host, Brian Sikes Howe, and today, my friends Sue and Abby from the band Tiny Wars will be joining me on the show. For those of you who were here last week and listened to my episode with the boys in Constant Hell, thanks for coming back. I think you're going to really dig today's conversation. We had a fantastic talk about growing up with music, pursuing your passions, and making a lot of great friends along the way. Thumbs up to all of that. This is a super fun episode. It was a super positive episode, and I'm super excited to share it with all of you. So please sit back, relax, and let's start the motherfucker. Hello and welcome to Start the Beat, the show where we highlight the past, present, and future of the Pittsburgh music scene. My name is Brian Sikes Howe. I am your host, and today I am joined by the one and only Tiny Wars. Make some noise. That wasn't too bad. But the music needs to just kind of...
Oh, yeah.
We got to get it to fade out on its own.
Sexy.
Sue, Abby, thanks for being here. How are you both doing?
Really good. Thanks for having us.
Really good. I just had a Kaiser Pilsner at Penn Brewery for the first time.
Ooh.
And it made me feel pretty happy.
Sue has been looking for a spot for excellent German food. She hasn't found yet.
Have not found that yet in Pittsburgh to date. I have found good German beer, including Penn Brewery today, and Trace Brewing has excellent German style beer, in my opinion. But German food, not so much.
Now, do you think that has to do with just the quality of food production in America to begin with? Or do you think that there's something more other than just like more to like the process?
Something culturally.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's just the preparation of the food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sue has treated us to a couple of dinners over the years where it's, raclette. Is that right?
That's a Swiss.
That's Swiss. But
That's
she
a Swiss
speaks
delicacy.
German, but she is from Switzerland. But
Yeah.
But her knowledge of German food and it's certainly her opinion and what she likes about it, I default to her on that all the time. But she has cooked for us, and man, I feel like I could thrive over there with what you've made us before. Like anything that's pickled, potatoes, covered in cheese.
Yeah.
I'm like, you are speaking to every pleasure center in my brain.
So this is probably somewhat similar to the fact that, you can make a really good song on a shitty guitar. Right?
I 1,000% agree.
It's all about the feel, man.
Yeah.
1,000% agree. You can make a really good song using 2 notes. You can.
And you can make really good German food with,
1 piece of dough. And some water and some salt.
Yeah.
Probably.
Sue knows what she's doing. So I default to her when she tells me if it's good or bad. I'm like, all right, you're right. This is shit.
Fair enough. Well, aside from German food, we're talking about probably some rock and roll today, guitar playing, writing songs, all of those sort of things. For those of you out there that do not know, Tiny Wars is a band. That's probably why they're on the show. They make music. It's a pop rock focused sort of thing.
I'd say like pop new wave is
new
what we
wave,
like, but we're
kind of power pop, kind of not, kind of, there's a little bit of a grit to it, I would say.
I agree with that.
I think that it's like distilled from a lot of people that have probably played harder music throughout the years that are kind of like, well, we want to maybe mature gracefully and maybe want to do some different things, but still want to make music. It's really hard to be a fan of like alternative, aggressive, harder music and like age gracefully, I have found.
I think it is too.
Well, that's a very interesting thought.
But I think part of that and where Sue kind of comes into my life in that way is that when you, especially like, let's just isolate with the Pittsburgh scene, like you get known for a style, right? And I'd imagine, maybe you get boxed in sometimes, whereas you have other musical interests rather that you want to explore. And because Sue is coming from, a really talented space, but still outside of that Pittsburgh community, she gives the people in the band who otherwise may be known for one thing an opportunity to do something completely different in a way that maybe another Pittsburgh musician might not have even seen the potential for. So if I'm taking my own experience of, metal bands and hard rock bands, if she had known me for the last 15 years, she may have never asked me to do a project like this. But because that was not the context that she had, all of a sudden we're coming in and going, hey, we do something completely different here. This is like the first time I've had a full runway to do whatever I'd like to do.
Totally. I find it's really fascinating to find the boxes that we sometimes unintentionally put ourselves in.
Yeah.
Because, if I think that anybody that is genuinely passionate about songwriting likes all kinds of different music. So it always has really been interesting to me throughout my whole life as I've done different kinds of music, different bands, metal, hip hop, indie rock, all that stuff. People were like, when people were surprised by that, it's just like, I just love music, dude. Like, it seems simple, but for some people that aren't musicians or artists, I can understand why it's like, they put you in that box of being like, oh, you're Abby and you're in this metal band and that's all you're ever going to be to them. And that's scary.
Totally.
Super scary.
Yeah, but sometimes also when you've done it for a few years or many years, it kind of like becomes your comfort zone, right?
You can get fat and happy doing that for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then maybe sometimes it's nice to be challenged by someone, if whether it be intentional or unintentional, or challenge yourself and kind of like become a more well-rounded musician, or just like go beyond the things you've done before,
Yeah, I think that ultimately it's just a matter of like doing what makes you happy as an artist. I think that there are plenty of people that I know that have done one kind of thing the entire time, and that's all they really like. That's their fucking thing. They're passionate about it. They're really good at it. That's cool.
We can say fuck on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
He broke the fuck barrier.
Yeah, there's the fuck barrier. Okay.
Every time we say fuck, can you hit that?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I totally lost our place because I was so excited about saying fuck.
Me too.
But yes, I know. I imagine, Abby, you just getting the chance to say fuck on a microphone is probably really exciting.
It's so good. It's so funny. It's so funny because
so good.
Almost like, anything that I would do in my day job where, you're letting in a lot of people of different age groups and belief systems and whatever, and you got to go a little more middle of the road. But every like private meeting that I have is just not FCC friendly. And I love that about it because everybody's like, how do you not swear on the air? I'm like, I don't know. It's just like whenever your grandma's around and you just kind of reel it in. I don't know.
It's a real fest.
It's a real fest.
Yeah.
Fest. Yeah.
Sorry.
So you've done music for a long time, both of you individually, and now you're working on music together.
Yes.
Let's do this whole kind of generic, how did Tiny Wars begin sort of question. How'd you two find each other?
When I first moved here about 5 years ago, I already had some friends and contacts in the local music scene because of my husband, Dave Wheeler, who has been very, connected here. And I knew people like Deb from Lady Beast. And after I had settled in, it took me a minute. I remember I hit her up to just jam a little bit in our practice space because I hadn't made music in way too long, and I was starting to really feel the consequences of that. I was like, oh my God, who am I? I don't feel like a person. I have to make music. I have to do something. So I just hit up a couple people I know just for fun. And we met up, and she brought her friend Rocco, who's also in Tiny Wars now. And eventually she brought Abby, whom she introduced as this, like, you know, super cool rock bitch. To me, it was like, that sounds really good. Like, just bring her. You know, she said something like that, you know. She said something like that. And I remember that because I was like, oh, yeah. You know, that always sounds good. And we just jammed a little bit, and it was fun, but nothing really came of it. Deb was way too busy anyway. I mean, you know, she has so many projects, whether it be music or
advocacy. She's always busy.
Yeah. So that kind of fizzled out. And then I did not see Abby in a while. I probably thought I was never going to see her again. But I recorded a song that I had for a while and randomly decided on a whim to send it to her via email. And I thought, you know, maybe she hates it, maybe she likes it, whatever. And what did you?
I stopped and I went, did you write this? Because to also clarify, Sue was playing the drums when we were just jamming out. And it was like, you know, again, we were playing like Black Sabbath songs just to play something, right?
Yeah.
But she was playing the drums, and she never said in any of those meetings that she was a songwriter or that she could lead a band. So like my context again of what she was capable of was, oh, she's a drummer. And so when she sent me that, I think that was my first question. I would text her and I'm like, did you write this? And she said, yeah, I have a ton of songs. And I went, okay, well, I guess we figured out what our band's going to sound like. Now I see it. And oddly enough, whenever we started piecing together maybe what would ultimately become Tiny Wars, the first person that I recommended we get in touch with was Rocco. She's like, I already know who that is. So we got him. Then we got Aaron. We had a kind of temporary, maybe like session drummer for a little while. And now we have Dennis, who used to play in the Motorcycles with me. So that's also like a little full circle moment that's really cool. Because that was maybe one of the first bands that I was in that in Pittsburgh I felt was very visible in the scene. So it's like cool for, you know, kind of to your earlier point about growing up in the scene and having the ability to change and grow up a little bit with your sound or what kind of musician you are. And it's been cool to have him kind of back in the fold.
Yeah.
That too.
That's awesome. So, you know, Abby, I have like a pretty good idea on like your background as a musician just because we've lived in the same city for a very long time. Sue, I don't know so much about like you and what you were into growing up and like what some of your first bands were like, if you would care to share any of that information.
Sure. I kind of grew up on music as like just a daily occurrence that was always around because my dad's a musician. And I remember starting to go through his and my mom's stash of records from a pretty young age. I remember me and my brother, we had this game where we, whoever found the scariest record first had to yell "scary man" and then run away. And then I had to find him. And the scary record was, what's it called? King Crimson.
That's a good one.
The Court of the Crimson King?
Exactly. Yeah, and that was so scary to us. And they had this big like treasure kind of like box where all the records were in. And we had this game where we had to find this record. But anyway, so I got into, you know, all the stuff like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and a lot of power pop because late 80s, early 90s, my parents were into power pop like Squeeze, Joe Jackson, Elvis Costello, all that kind of stuff. So, and then when I got a little older, I started to discover metal and hard rock. And I remember listening to the Scorpions for the first time and I was like, oh my God, this is so like bad and like sexual. It really felt like tasting a forbidden fruit. Like
yeah,
I remember hearing those songs that were obviously like, even though I was like 12, I kind of knew, what the gist was. And I was like, oh my God, this is like so like heavy and bad. And I was hooked. So, that's that. And I had plenty of bands throughout my life. Some were like a lot of like 70s rock, or I was in an all-girl grunge band for a while back home. And I just tried to evolve as a songwriter and as a musician,
Yeah, totally.
I just kind of knew instinctively that was what I wanted to do and who I was.
I think that it's really fun whenever you grow up listening to a lot of music. You already have like such a foundation for like maybe the kind of stuff that you want to make going into it. And it makes it a lot of fun to just like go in and start to replicate the stuff that like you grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
I always find it really interesting. Sometimes I talk to people on this show and it's like, yeah, like I didn't really start listening to music until I was like 16. I have like a hard time relating with people that are like that. Nothing against it. I mean, your journey is your journey.
Totally.
But I find that like sometimes like when you grow up with it, it's just like it's in your DNA a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely.
The way that she talks about music is like a really good way of personifying that feeling. When you grow up with it, the way that she says, like when you're out of a band, and I know that like personally in my life, I've quit a bunch of times where I go, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, it's just, why am I doing this? And then inevitably, and I love the way that you put it, is like you just don't feel like yourself anymore. You lost something, or there's some part of you that needs to be released that you've now kind of caged by not having that outlet. And that's like something that kind of can't be denied. And that in my mind is kind of what makes you a musician. Right? Because there's different degrees of musicality as well. But the desire, need, and compulsion to create, it's kind of a vocation for you that you realize that even if you never make $1 on it, you still have to create something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of person I think that Sue is, and certainly where I feel like
that I don't want to make $1.
Not that we don't. We will OnlyFans this shit in a second. We do not care.
Yeah, it's really freeing though to be in a place where you can make art that not only that like you love, but that you working with people that are also in it together. And you find those other people that kind of like speak the same air quote language.
Yes.
And you can start to write music together and start to build this thing. Because I think that all the times that I've been in situations where I've quit the band or something like that, or I've left a situation, it's like I do feel empty, but it's like most of the time we weren't speaking the same language anyway.
I see.
You get a lot of people that I think want to do something, and it's like any other relationship, like before you find your life partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are in other relationships with other people, and it's like, we're not speaking the same language. We can't have the same soul conversation with each other.
It's like thinking you have a type and then finding out, no, you don't.
Sure.
You have people that you connect with.
Well, you learn what you want and what you don't want. Mainly.
Yes.
So, it was probably important for you or for us to be in these other bands and learn what we learned, because otherwise we wouldn't be who we are now and we wouldn't be where we're at now.
There's no snowball's chance in hell that I would have had the mindset or patience to do Tiny Wars 10 years ago. There's no way that I would have been musically ready for it. And there's no way that I would have had the wherewithal to slow myself down and say, okay, we're not hiding behind distortions and fuzz pedals and all that kind of stuff. Like I just wouldn't have had it. It came at the perfect time where I was already in a mindset to go, I want to be released of this thing that's kind of boxed me in.
Sure.
Sure.
It's scary too, though. Whenever you are getting to that point and like, again, mentioning like dabbling with you, Abby, working in like a genre of music that isn't like, for me, it's not too different from anything that you had done in the past.
Yeah,
but I understand that trajectory. But it's
yeah.
still like palatable, accessible.
Accessible is
For
the word I
sure.
would use, and I don't.
It's
Have,
way more pop centric.
But there's like nothing wrong
like
with
the,
that.
like metal that you've done in the
well,
past.
I think about like I was not aware that there were bands that I was in that wouldn't be accessible, because to me, like, that is just like rock music, you pussy. Like, why isn't this accessible? Like, why can't this be played in front of children?
Why don't you get it?
Why don't you get it, loser? But like now I'm kind of looking at it and going like, oh, okay. Because one of the, and even in, while I was in Fist Fight in the Parking Lot, there was another death metal band that I was in called Necrophagia that was like really on the extreme side of things. But also it was around the time that I was becoming a wife and eventually a parent. And there was a part of that that felt like a costume at some point, because we were going on an ethos that I didn't know that I was mentally in anymore. We were still trying to do it. And I felt like in that project in particular, I was just really happy to do. I was super pumped to write that album with them and kind of, play live and meet all these cult of personalities. But at the same time, it was almost like studying for like a physics exam like every week, because I don't know that I wanted it as much.
Sure.
And so then I did have some time that I took away, just being, a parent and still being in Fist Fight, but adjusting to all that. Mm-hmm. And then, then it really did feel like time to do something different. And honestly, it had to be really special if I was going to do it again. Because again, all those times where you're like, music is hard and it hurts my feelings and I don't want to do it anymore. And then all of a sudden, somebody just incredible comes into your life and then you go, shit, I'm totally going to do this again.
Yeah. And it's always going to be work. Like,
oh yeah.
It's not like just, ponies and butterflies and fun. And it's a lot of fucking work. Push the button. A lot of fucking work. There you go. And, for the music and for our relationship, we nurture it. We put a lot of effort into it, conscious effort.
Yeah.
And I mean, it pays off, but you really have to want this. Otherwise, this is not going to work. There's no way in hell.
I agree.
It's very unforgiving, Yeah. It's sometimes not very rewarding. But there's just this voice inside of me. There's just this urge that I really have to do it. It's not a choice. I have to do it.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, I don't exist. So,
I understand and I relate with that 100%. I find that the most important thing as I've gotten older and continued to make music myself is it's not about like what I'm doing, but really like who I'm doing it with. Like the environment is everything, because like having the right people around me like actually like helps me keep my head in it, because anytime where I'm like, I can't do this, I'm around people that are telling me I can. And that's like huge, because like, I could sit in my room and write all the songs that I want by myself all day. But it's like, ultimately, like I do want to be in a band. I always think about like growing up watching like the Iron Maiden Live After Death VHS tape, and it's like, I want to be Steve Harris. Funny enough, I never played a bass in my fucking life, but that's where it started, and it's just like, that's the thing. I want to be in a band. I want to be in this bigger thing and have these experiences and write these songs, but with people and like people that I care about. Yeah. And it's like, it's so much just like about finding the right people. I think sometimes people can overlook that. And it's like, I mean, I've been in those bands where it's like, again, I think I'm just kind of repeating what I said earlier, where it's like, everybody just wants to be in a band and these projects kind of happen that are, I don't want to say doomed to fail, but it's like,
if they might just not have the infrastructure to survive.
Yeah. If you don't like support each other, like outside of like just showing up to play, like if you're not just there and like willing to do the work that, that Sue had mentioned, where it's like, if you're not able to like help lift each other up, pick up the pieces, it's like a family, right? Where it's like everybody has to be able to support each other in some sort of a way.
Exactly. And
for it to work.
And then I have found over the years that a lot of people say they really want this, right? And they say like, I really want to go for it and I really want to make it and I'll do whatever it takes, but then they don't do shit.
Well, sure.
So that's where it gets hard.
Or they don't know what the shit is to
they
do
don't
to
know
make
what
that
the
happen.
steps are.
It's like you can't
to get from A to B. And that's just like
they can't mentally afford it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good way of putting it.
Because
it's that is like the mental load of yes, there's this payoff or potential at the end, but it has so many steps along the way, and none of them are sexy.
No, exactly. Yeah. There's so many hurdles. You need stamina, right? Tons of it. And a lot of people might, have a good ear for songs, be good songwriters. They just, but they don't have the stamina you need if you want to get anywhere.
Like, say, for example, somebody might ask me like, hey, Brian, I'm interested in starting a podcast.
Tell me how.
I'm like, do you really want to do it? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do you really want to do it?
Yeah.
You just need the passion. That's the thing. Like, how do I record stuff at home? It's like, well, you need to really want to fucking do it.
Yeah.
And stop putting it on a pedestal like it's something you can't do, right?
Yeah, because like you'll get like, there's some people, I'm thinking of one person in particular right now, where it's like, they always come up to me with an idea. And it's just like, look, all you got to do is have the passion and maybe a laptop that half works. You could start a podcast with that.
You can.
You can make it work. When I started the podcast, I had like a Windows 98 computer and one USB microphone.
Aww.
That was all I had. I just put one microphone, But like I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't exactly like perfect, but it was like I wanted to do it. I made it work.
That brings us back to what you said at the very beginning. You don't necessarily need like expensive gear and all that shit. Like it's fun to have, but if you really want to do it and if you want to write good songs, you don't need like a $6,000 Gibson guitar.
No, absolutely
not. It's nice, but you don't need it.
Right.
It's, that's just like the cherry on top. But if you really want to do something, you'll find a way, and it's going to be like a journey. And you'll eventually get better equipment and have more experience, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I find that I never even thought about like asking anybody else like, how do I do this? I just started doing it. I was just doing stuff, and then
want to find out.
And the next thing you know, I'm doing it.
Yeah,
like granted, there's nothing wrong with asking people questions, please,
Right.
But I'm just saying that
you put yourself through the school of life in this arena, right?
Yeah.
You just said like, I'm compelled to do this thing and I will do anything to learn it. And a lot of the times that does mean jumping in and doing it. And again, it sounds like you've come across people like this. I know I certainly have. They think that in asking the question that you have some secret.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That they don't have yet.
Totally.
And you're like, here's the really unsexy part.
Sure.
There's no fucking shortcuts. You are now the adult in the room. Figure it out.
Totally. I get a lot of the like how can I get into DJing? It's like, I've been DJing professionally since 2017. Maybe people like see me doing this now because like I post more about it now. But like, it's not like I just started doing this last week and I can give you some answer. Just start doing it.
You have to
There's
start
no
doing
shortcut.
it.
It's like, how can I be on the radio, Abby?
Well, totally. And that happens a lot.
Really?
And
Okay.
it happens a lot. And there are, some instances where I get to interact with like more college students that, will ask questions about their podcast and like pointers. I don't mind that at all. And like kind of to your point, it's like, I don't want to come off as if I don't enjoy people who are on the quest or want to ask questions, because I'm like a wind-up toy. I'll keep talking until they get tired. But at the same time, there's so much faltering along the way. Again, I think that there's so many situations where you feel like somebody just wants the quick answer. Just be like, all you have to do is apply.
Sure.
But the reality is I had to do like probably 4 to 5 years of really shitty shows.
Yeah.
Where I didn't have my own voice and I was mimicking what I thought other people who were good at it sounded like in my mind. But it probably took a really long time to be myself. And that might have been the turning point where it actually started working. But yeah, you're a clumsy, shitty mess at the beginning. I totally get, people want the quicker payoff, or that you see somebody even on socials that you're like, well, how did this happen for them?
Well, that's
like, well, it wasn't overnight, dude.
Nobody.
Most of the time it was not.
Yeah. People very rarely post the stuff that they don't want you to see.
I have encouraged people who are doing things like, let's say you have somebody who's like a woodworker, or like somebody who makes something, and be like, you, there's nothing wrong with letting people in on the process, even if you fuck up. You might actually reach somebody better that way, because at least you're being real. But you're absolutely right. Like, we're seeing the highlight reel. We're seeing the end result. We're seeing the finish line. That's not what it is. And also, you're cheating yourself if you jump to the finish line. It's a whole like slew of experiences that you'll have.
Yeah.
In failing upwards in a way.
Mm-hmm. And you'll get a lot of those people that we were already talking about before too, where it's like they're in it and then realize that it's not actually like what they want to be doing once they see what it actually is. Once it's like, oh, like we actually have to write these songs. What do you mean we have to practice every week? What do you mean that I only have 5 minutes to get my gear on and off stage?
Right.
All of that stuff that it compounds. And I think it is, understandably, it is hard. And I think it is hard for a lot of people. And you do that for so many years. And it's like,
or you
it kind of sucks.
A band like, on stage somewhere at like, a big venue. And I always try to pause, like anytime that you even see a band that's doing well. And, as a musician, if like you feel that tinge of jealousy, where you're like, oh man, I wish I was doing that. Be like, never forget that those dudes played on the floor of a shitty bar on a Tuesday night and nobody watched them except the other bands.
Yeah.
That always has to happen. Like that's the reality of probably what gave them the experience.
And then they didn't quit.
And they didn't quit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the downfalls that I have found being an aging musician that has experience, and now I'm in bands with, everybody's been in bands now at this point for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, depending on, some of these people we're getting up there. We're not getting any younger. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been through it. And a negative side effect that happens sometimes is like, say you're starting up a new band. Everybody has this like, well, I've already done the shitty gigs in my other bands, so now I don't want to do it with this new band. And it's like, regardless of how much experience we may have individually outside of this is a new thing. And we have to start at the bottom again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pill to swallow, I think, for some, like as you get, as you mature.
Right.
As you mature, you start to get to the age where you go, I don't have to do this shit anymore.
Also, maybe you don't want to be on a 6-band bill and go on at 1 a.m. to play to 5 people when you're 50,
Yeah.
It's just like, I kind of get it, but yeah.
Full circle on the podcast thing though too is, you want to do it? Here's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's the thing, is just like, it doesn't matter what bands we've been in or how long we've been playing. If we want to go to Chicago and play a show, chances are our first show might not be the best.
Yeah.
Chances are our 4th show might not be the best.
Right.
But if we want to do this, we need to actually go, have a good attitude, be nice to people, and fucking rock their goddamn socks off, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's all we could do.
Yeah.
Because if you go with a shitty attitude and play shitty, and why even bother?
I'm super grateful with the crew and the makeup of the people in Tiny Wars, that we have probably had a nice variety in the time that we've been playing out of shitty gigs and then bonkers like opportunities that we're like all looking at each other and kind of pinching ourselves that we're getting to do. And regardless of which one of those we end up in, we have a blast. Like, and we take care of each other. And so like, I can even think that we had a gig that was like not what we expected. And we sat up after the gig, like, and closed the place down just with each other. And that might be part of the secret sauce of what keeps the heartbeat going of that, is that even on a shitty gig, we still want to spend time with each other.
Yeah.
We still want to be around each other. And we even like, we recently did like a little weekend away with each other.
Yeah.
And I felt tearful when it was wrapped up, and that's special too. Cause I don't know that I've always felt connected and close to people that I've been in bands with, but I don't know if they could all break my heart in one fell swoop, but like everybody in Tiny Wars like owns a part of me right now. And I'm grateful for it. But it will always make it that no matter what opportunity we have, we're going to have a really good time because we want to be around each other.
Yeah. And that's super duper important. And it's also really important too, like as you get, again, we keep on saying as you get older, that's like the fucking theme of this goddamn podcast.
Our knee. That was my knee.
Yeah.
That was my dentures.
They popped out of my mouth.
As we fall apart day by day, it's important to note that, like, we all have other things that we could be doing. So it's important that, not only I used to think about, okay, this is how I'm going to phrase this. So I used to always think about shows in the aspect of, like, you need to be empathetic towards the people that are coming out to the show, because this is their night off and they're deciding to spend this time to see you and these other people play music, right?
And pay for it.
And pay for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also now, we have lives and jobs and families. It's like, also, this is my time off in a way. I'm not always getting paid to play shows with my band.
Right.
So if I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I'm with people that I like and that I'm having a good fucking time. Yeah. Because it's all, if I'm not having a good time, somebody else has a bad time in the band. And then we play like shit. And then the people that paid to come see us are having a bad time. And it's like a domino effect of just like.
Yeah, right. But the situation we do have in Tiny Wars is not a given. And it's kind of a privilege,
I agree.
I do see that because, like you said before, you might just get along with your bandmates and everything, but it might not be this like super deep friendship,
Yeah.
And that's okay too. But when it does happen, it's definitely a gift and something you want to cherish and nourish,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're aware of that.
So with the band, with Tiny Wars right now, I know that you recently released a single.
We did actually like 2 back-to-back. So this was an interesting way to go about it, because I think that we probably are also coming from the same school of thought that you have to have a physical product when you're, done at the end of the day, and something that you can like sell at shows and have money, to do the next thing with.
Dinosaur thinking.
Also,
we're cursed.
Love merch.
We're kind of, right? Listen.
We're merch whores.
I love merch. Love merch. We have a lot of merch. And that being said, I feel like we had looked at doing a couple songs, and one of the big, narratives was like, okay, we'll do this as like a 7-inch vinyl. That makes sense. And then I think we started looking at the price of that and like, how long is that going to take to do? And what ultimately is the payoff? Like if you can make a record, I could see profitability for that. If you're making a 7-inch, that's a little bit harder. I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's a little bit harder of a sell for folks, because you have to charge more. And it's 2 songs, right? Mm-hmm. When you can rent it for free on any streaming service that you want.
Yeah.
Sure.
So in that sense, I think, embraced the opportunity and or challenge to just change our thinking about how to do it. And again, kind of removing what we have experienced in the past is correct, which is we must make CDs. Now we're like, no, okay, let's try a digital release and see if we can change the metrics. Like, let's see if we can change what we deem as an important metric for the band. And I feel so happy to like kind of see how we approached and adapted to that. So we did one release in July, which was a kind of a punkier song called Neubad, which is about Sue's hometown. I shouldn't say it's not really about your hometown. It's about a situation in your hometown of which you named it. I'll let you speak on that if you'd like to. I don't know how much you want to tell everybody. That sums it up
pretty well.
Okay.
I like to listen to you.
Okay.
Go on.
Great. And then the second single just came out last Friday, and it's called Hopeless Place. And I would say from like, the variety of what Tiny Wars can do, one, Neubad being very punky and more aggressive and purposeful, and then you have Hopeless Place, which is just like dreamy and haunting, and like that's our new wave flex there. And so I love that they kind of came out that way, because if somebody was not aware of us before, that is a really nice cross-section of the kind of music that we're making, but it also gives us a bunch of lanes to do everything in between it. So I'll be interested to see kind of from the writing process, like what we gained from doing those songs that way, and, you know, falling in love with them for different reasons, like kind of where that then puts us in a creative path.
It's funny to talk about like releasing these songs that are, you know, different stylistically and it being like so different, but like it's really not, you know, like if you think about like the stuff that like I grew up listening to, it's just like Susie and the Banshees or like The Cure. How many roads did those bands go down? Like you have like punkier stuff, dreamier stuff, and it's all the same artists. And it's like, I don't know what happened where we fell down this path unintentionally of like having to box in artists so much.
Because it's easier to market, it's easier to sell. And this generation now that I think we even maybe have modeled this idea of a digital release and like how is it actually working today versus how we knew it to work 10 years ago or 15 years ago. They refuse the box. They will not be put in it. They will make whatever music makes them happy. They'll do as many projects as they want to do. And like, there's like some part of me, you know, we always talk kind of like lovingly about getting older, because there's, I think, something beautiful about that as well. But I always feel like the youth still comes from watching what they're doing and not being turned off by it. Like when you watch somebody younger and how they approach music or how they even approach like language in a lot of ways. You know, we always can joke about how like, you know, this generation talks about Riz and shit, but I there's a part of me that loves that.
Did you say Riz?
Yeah, the Riz is strong. You can't let somebody. But that's what I'm saying is like, it's that when you still have a mindset to observe younger people and not say, that's stupid, you still have a ton of potential for growth no matter how old you are, right? So we might be more seasoned than they are, or classic, if you will.
But, of course.
But we can learn from them too, and we can still grow.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I really like is that if I hear a new hot band, like something that all the youngsters like, and if I don't get it, that excites me. It like makes me happy to know that I don't understand what these people like. Yeah. Because that's like, I know that like when I was, you know, 12 years old and listening to like Korn or whatever, I'm sure there were people who are like, I don't get it, but I loved it. It meant everything to me. So I might not understand what these kids are listening to, but if they feel the same way that I felt about the shit that I was listening to, great. That's what else. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be for me.
I have such joy in watching people have a good fucking time.
Yeah.
I really love it. And even like my kid, I'm never gatekeeping with her on things that she likes. And I kind of remember, not that they gatekeeped necessarily, because I liked a lot of the stuff that my parents liked. And I feel like you had that situation with your dad, like the stuff that he listened to and your mom listened to, you were like, this is great. Excellent choices, everybody. But I remember like when I would like something that was not within those confines, my parents would kind of like, you know, razz me a little bit on that. And they'd be like, that sucks.
Sure.
And that made it all the more important to get into, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I
felt like I was on the right track when they didn't like it.
You knew it.
You're like, we're living now.
Yeah, we got it. But so like even I watched that with, you know, my daughter's pretty young, but like if she likes K-pop, you know, and I don't get K-pop, I try to get K-pop. I just try to like not say anything about it or create a negative connotation for her.
Sure.
In some way being like, well, maybe this instead of that. Every once in a while, I'll try to influence her. She got into like a little bit of Miley Cyrus and Kelly Clarkson. I was like, hey, that's cool. Have you ever listened to Paramore? Maybe you'll like Paramore. And it was like, whatever. She took a little sip of it and was like, whatever. Not her path. I have to let it go.
It's so funny like how important it is to like find something that is your own thing.
Yeah.
When you're younger, you know, my parents were never really pushy against anything that I listened to. But I remember like my dad's like, he's the 3 M's, Maiden, Megadeth, Metallica.
That's good,
you know,
dad.
That's fucking him. But you know, and like I grew up around that stuff and I loved all that stuff. But, you know, it's funny. It's like my favorite band when I was in first grade was Iron Maiden, you know?
Pretty awesome.
But then like things happened where it's like when you're in second or third grade and you're, you know, 8 or 9 years old, however old I was, I don't remember the ages, but you know, around that time period, there's no way that Green Day releases Dookie and you don't love it.
Yeah.
And then you start to find your own things, you know, and then it's like my dad didn't give a shit about any of that, but it was like, whatever. And then like Korn happened and Slipknot, you know, all this stuff happens as you become a teenager. And it's like, yeah, that's way different than the stuff that like I grew up with, which now is objectively the coolest out of any of it.
Right.
But still there's that time period when I was a kid where I was like, I need my own thing. I want to listen to Green Day and Rage Against the Machine and the Smashing Pumpkins, all the radio stuff in the 90s,
Totally.
you know, that's what it was.
But you know, there was something even texturally about music that, if my daughter finds on her iPad or whatever that like, you know, electronic music, and she tells me all the time that she loves EDM. And I'm like, do you? Okay, that's fine. But what I think is funny is like, if I'm listening to the radio, and the example that it comes to mind is like, I think I was listening to DVE and REM's Losing My Religion came on. And she stopped and she said, this sounds so weird. And I kind of was like, what's weird about it? But then
just like organic instruments.
I think that was it. Because but then again, you go back to going, you know, not everything is for you, but also the context of what does she hear all the time? That sounds different than what she hears all the time. She doesn't know how to personify it, so she says it sounds weird.
Well, it's way janglier than
it's super jangly. I was
and it's not like it's not quantized. It's not robotic.
I was just gonna say, like a lot of young people, I think, like the TikTok generation, they might think that singing sounds like
Siri.
Or like with the voice correction, like the auto-tune. Like,
auto-tune. Yeah. Because it's on almost every mainstream pop, R&B, and hip-hop track these days.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a stylistic element that's just the basics these days.
Yeah, it sounds like...
So they when you hear them like record themselves singing or video themselves singing a song on TikTok, they kind of like emulate these like auto-tune sounds. Have you ever noticed that?
Because because they think
how
that's
you sing.
That's correct.
That's
pitch
just how
or something.
That's how a voice is supposed to sound. That's mind-blowing to me. You know, like... that's all they know.
Well, it gets in like
that's how you're supposed to sing. That's how you sing well.
Yeah. And to that point, you know, the times we've been lucky to get opportunities to do all ages shows. And I think sometimes when you go into that, you're like, all right, these kids are either going to love this or they're going to fucking hate it. And anytime that we see a little bit of that spark where there's like little kids at the merch table. And even if they're not going to buy something, they're like, sign me. You're like, that's awesome because, you know, again, what they might have schematically in front of them as this is what music sounds like. If you can like kind of crack that veneer a little bit and go, it does. And also it sounds like this. Did this make you feel something? Like, that's cool. Like, Sue's seen me do it before, especially because I guess I have a kid. I don't know. I probably would be like this anyway. Like people who can't refrain from like petting somebody's dog or something like that. But like if a kid comes up to the merch table, I'm like, what grade are you in? Oh, do you like your teacher? You know, I lose my mind. I go out of being like cool rock and roll right into like,
yeah, who cares?
Do you have a cat? Like, you know, I love
cute.
that. I love that.
There's a lot of young girls that seem to feel empowered after seeing us. And that's, to me, that's the biggest freaking compliment there is, because that means we're doing something right. We're authentic, you know. A good live show, you can't put a filter on that or anything. Like it either comes across or it doesn't, you know.
Yeah,
you can't fake that shit. And when it comes across, then that's what I live for.
Payoff, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that no matter what, there's always gonna be counterculture. You know, counterculture influences everything, and it has for a very long time. Sometimes, I mean, how many cool things have come from the underground that will say the man, air quote, takes and regurgitates their own little, like, crappy version of.
And then, marketable.
Yeah, it always happens. But with that being said, there's always people that are interested in like the air quote real stuff, like I do some all ages DJ events, and I do like the new metal party that I do. We do a lot of all ages for that.
Nice.
And the young crowds that we've had coming out to the shows is mind blowing.
Is new metal having a revival?
Totally.
Because of the whole 90s craze that's going on right now?
So like new metal you'd put in the aughts, right? Like the early aughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 94 to 2004.
Right.
Oh, wow, okay.
I saw Eurodance is back too.
Yeah.
And I was kind of delighted about that.
Yeah, I think that like it's just things come in those cycles. There's the 20, 25 year sort of cycle thing.
Totally.
Like, a decade ago, there was, a handful of pop punk bands that all of a sudden were trying to sound like Nirvana. And now, we're going to have a handful of metal bands that are trying to sound like Korn again. And then
that's
you know what I'm
I feel so old.
Well,
God.
I'm dreading the MySpace rock revival that is going to be inevitable.
Oh, woof. Tila Tequila comes back from the grave.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever happened to her?
Probably nothing good, unfortunately.
I do want to say that
maybe we don't want to know.
The trajectory was not promising.
Yeah. Yeah, but I
maybe
mean,
she's great. Who knows?
Who knows? Eventually, there's going to be a bunch of bands that come back that are trying to sound like who were Attack or Chiodos or any of those bands. That's going to come back.
See, the funny thing, even going back to counterculture is like the time where emo was having its moment was the time that I was about as deep into heavy metal as I could be. So it's a weird thing too, but especially with my day job, that's like a period of time I just can't account for. It's just one of, I just wasn't in it.
Yeah.
And I
was also a couple years too old. A lot of the kids that were super into emo were probably born, I want to say like 1989 and up.
Totally.
Somewhere in there, for sure.
No, I was born in 1985, and I always felt like I was just a few years ahead.
So there were they were these young kids. They were like teenagers when I was already maybe 20. I'm not sure. That's how I remember it. That's just my personal experience.
I just started with the grunge stuff, skipped, and then came back.
I remember it was really adjacent because at that time, like in my early 20s, when I'm starting to like really get into like playing more and more shows, I mean, you're always playing shows with bands that are younger, it's inevitable. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was just playing so many shows with so many high school bands that were all wanting to be, whatever band of the week you could think of, whatever Hot Topic t-shirt band you could think of, right? The thing that I always thought was really cool, though, is when I was in high school, the access to technology and like the equipment and things wasn't so much a thing. There was like 2 bands in my high school. And then when I was like, a decade later, I'm playing shows with like bands that go to the same high school that I went to. And there's like a dozen bands in that high school. It was being in a band became like a thing that a lot of people were doing. When I was growing up, nobody was in fucking bands. There was like only a couple. It was a lot rarer than it seemed to be in that time frame.
I feel like that's how it was for me in high school
too. For me too.
Yeah.
There was no access to it or anything, or no one was talking about it. So it's kind of a bummer.
But I remember seeing like, maybe like in high school, there would be like a talent show and like a group of dudes that would have a band.
Yeah.
And, that honestly was probably about the time when I was like getting that feeling of being like, I should be doing that. Why am I not doing that? What the fuck? I should be friends with those dudes. And like, you'd be like, I got to figure this out.
Because no one had handed you a electric guitar or a drum set, most likely.
I had a piano, and
of course you had a piano.
When I switched
or a violin.
When I switched to drums, my dad was very disappointed.
There you go.
He was like, I had a long fucking day, and this kid is like, So I was like, all right, maybe guitar.
Or they just assumed you might not be into that. You just might be into the piano or the cello.
Well,
I don't know how that is nowadays, but it definitely was like that when I was a little younger.
What, like an expectation to stick with a certain
or just
category of
assuming
music?
That you might not want to play electric guitar as a girl.
Yeah. No, it is fair.
That is a thing. I'm not saying,
I think particularly at the time that Sue's a little bit younger than me, but like I think about the time frame of when we would have been exploring our musicality. There was a part of me, I had this conversation with somebody a couple weeks ago when I was talking about like kind of starting to get into bands at 15. And the band that I got in at that time wanted me to play the keyboard and sing backup.
There you go.
That's all they wanted me to do. But I just kept not bringing my keyboard.
You rebel.
I just kept bringing my guitar. And then they would be like, yeah, but cool, but could you also bring your keyboard? And I'm like, oh, this week I forgot it. And then I kind of like bullied into a guitar playing position in that band because I think I even had this idea that was a feminine role and I kind of wanted to buck against it. I was kind of like, I don't want to be that in this. I want to do what you're doing. Like, you can't fence me in. Like, I will. But no, I think that's interesting. And you probably did that too. But also you became a drummer, which again is, I hate to like sound generalistic in that, like, oh, well, girls don't play drums. But, generally, you're outnumbered. That
either, and I don't know how it is nowadays. I can't really speak to that. I don't have children. It was just for me. It was a little bit more of like, jumping over some hurdles and like really seeking it out and really wanting it for me to start to play drums. If I think of like my dude friends in high school, I would like study with and go to their house. They all had like a drum set in their basement that they had since they were like 6. Because at some point, like someone thought like, oh, get this boy a drum set. Or they had like an electric guitar or whatever.
Right.
That was not the case. How many times did you see that in like your female friend's basement or house?
Never.
See, it's just never. Like, it's a thing.
Yeah.
And I remember going to some like jam sessions where like some older guys would tell me like, don't play the drums, like just play the piano or sing. Stop. That has totally happened to me. And that made me think like, you know what? I'll fucking show you.
Now I'm definitely
that made me want it even more because I was like, it hurt. It did hurt. But at the same time, it made me feel like I'll freaking show you.
Good motivator.
I don't know. Maybe it's not so much the case anymore.
It'd be great if it wasn't because it's a disservice to box anybody out of or gatekeep anybody out of music.
I mean, I'm sure it's probably still the case in some unfortunate scenarios.
Sure.
But also there's like a lot of cool programs like the Girls Rock and things like that where there's like areas for young people that want to get into this. Like maybe not every city has things like this, but at least I know in Pittsburgh we do. Like there are programs that, are out there that encourage people to do things.
Yeah.
And I think that there are also like a lot of women in music in general in Pittsburgh, which is really cool.
I feel like I see it more now and it's so much less of a novelty. Like I can see a great press for a band and have no idea there's even a female in it. Like, cause I've listened to the band and there's no point of view, like where you go like, is there a girl in this band?
Oh,
like,
sure.
That never happens. And like, I do feel like, at least from my observation, I don't know what the experience is of those particular people in those bands, but it just seems like it's so much more inclusive. And that's like a burden that you can kind of like, or like generational trauma, you can kind of like go over. You're like, oh man, they're going to figure it out. This is awesome.
With your time in Pittsburgh, Sue, and getting to know a lot of people in the area and playing in bands and all this sort of stuff, are you having a good time?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. When it comes to music, I think I have never felt more seen and more able to really create what had previously only lived like in my heart and in my mind, and have other people really understand what I'm trying to do.
Sure.
That has never happened to me to this extent as it has happened to me in the USA or in Pittsburgh. Not sure exactly why that is. Maybe there's some just luck in that, or maybe it's just because Americans grow up on rock and roll way more so than people in Switzerland. Maybe that's why. But I have never felt like I can be myself, unapologetically, authentically myself as I can be in Pittsburgh, where you can be a total freak ass. and no one gives a shit. I love it.
Love it. Well, I think that we can probably wrap up this conversation here. I want to thank you both for taking some time to chat with me today about being old and rocking and rolling.
Yeah, thank you so much for making me feel super ancient.
No, this was super cool, and you're always super insightful as well. And,
that's interesting.
Nice to relate to other musicians who have had different paths but similar experiences.
Totally. Well, if you want to do any of the sort of tell people where to find your stuff, you could probably just look up Tiny Wars on the internet. Use the Google or Ask Jeeves, whatever search engine you prefer.
Always ask the little paperclip on your Microsoft Word app. But yeah,
I would say we're most active on Instagram, which is at tiny.wars.
Oh, again. Sue, Abby, Tiny Wars, thank you so much for being here. Shout outs to all of the other members of the band that are not here.
Rocco, Aaron, and Dennis.
They're here in spirit. And that's it. I'll be back again next week with another episode. Same time, same place, same channel. You know the drill. My name is Brian. Start the Beat's the name of this show. Please like, subscribe, follow. Don't give me your money. Give it to somebody else that needs it. That's your nice task for the day. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to the people around you. Peace.